Welcome to today's Fallon Forum. Thank you for joining us, folks. We're broadcasting live today from the Webcast One studio in the Skywalk in downtown Des Moines. Downtown Des Moines, of course, also known as the cultural and culinary crossroads of America. And you will not see that any more emphatically than this coming weekend with the Arts Festival, one of the biggest arts festivals in the country. So take that East Coast, take that West Coast. Yeah, right here in Des Moines, Iowa. Big arts festival. I want to thank all the folks who are listening to this show on Wednesday, either on KHOI out of Ames or KPVL out of Northeast Iowa. You can listen to the show live Monday through Friday, noon to 1 on the Fallon Forum website. That's www.fallonforum.com. And if you are listening live and you have an opinion or a comment or a question, or you want to throw barbs at me, call 244-0077. That's 244-0077. The toll-free number is 855-244-0077. Later in the program, we're going to talk with Mark Peterson, a soybean farmer who's got some thoughts on the importance of conservation in agriculture. Later in the program, still, we're going to talk with two very esteemed guests with the One World Birth Movement. This is part of our new direction, new beat on learning. A new segment we just kicked off last week. We're going to talk oftentimes about school and education directly for kids, but this is a bigger education issue because we've seen a lot of problems with the global understanding of the importance of being free to deliver a birth how you want to. So we're going to talk about that later in the program. Two distinguished guests, both joining us on Skype. One from Great Britain. And so stick around for that as well. But first, this is a pretty important day because we are talking climate change today. Obviously, the president very shortly, in fact, in about 20 minutes, will be, actually about a half an hour, I guess, will be announcing his position on climate change, what he proposes to do to address the problem. And my suspicion is that we're not going to hear anything on Keystone. There's still, I think Bill McKibben is right on that. There's still work to be done as that moves through the bureaucracy. And of course, the bureaucracy is just cumbersome when it comes to issues like that. And it is anybody's guess as to what will happen. Again, if the president comes out aggressively with a criticism about our over-reliance on oil, on coal, on natural gas, then, there's a possibility that we might begin to see some hope that he would eventually ixnay the Keystone Pipeline. And, on that issue, too, of those three fossil fuel, the three legs of the tripod, if you will, I think it's become easier and more convenient and more comfortable to criticize coal. And we saw in the last few years several setbacks, several proposals for new coal-fired power plants, two right here in Iowa that were defeated. And there are various reasons why that happened. Again, good citizen activism, good support among public officials, and also changing rules at the at the federal level. The EPA is changing standards on carbon as a contaminant, as a pollutant. So, it's not hard to imagine that the president is going to be a little bit more critical of coal than he might be of natural gas. I think some are still seeing natural gas as the transition fuel, if you will, as we move from fossil fuels toward renewables. And I understand the reason for that. It doesn't appear to be as polluting. It certainly is not as polluting when in terms of carbon, but I do hope the president sees that methane is as much of a problem as carbon. In fact, it could be more of a problem in some ways. And here in Iowa, we've got a big issue with, fracking, the hydraulic fracking, the technique that releases the methane from deep shale beds in the earth. That, of course, is particularly noticed in states like New York and in the Appalachian Mountains, other parts of the country. But here in Iowa, we don't have that going on. But what we have going on here is the sand removal, the frack sand mining, removing the sand from our precious bluff lands in northeast Iowa. And so I'm hoping that the president understands not just the environmental degradation that goes on with natural gas mining, but that he understands that methane is also a very serious contaminant. Again, if this speech is going to be serious about moving us forward to address this crisis, it has to do more than just talk about clean coal versus dirty coal. It has to do more than just talk about improving mileage. And again, we need, there's no doubt about it. We need to do more to improve the fuel efficiency of our vehicles. That's absolutely certain. But if it's just a matter of a little bit of an increase over a long period of time, I mean, I know we're supposed to go up to 35 miles per gallon, by 2017? Good start, but again, we are in crisis mode. This is not just another issue. This is not something you just tick off the scorecard saying, hey, I addressed climate change, I addressed gay marriage, I addressed immigration. This is the defining crisis of our century. We need to grapple with it in a big way, and my concern is that the president is going to offer some good things, get some pats on the back, and maybe feel like he has effectively addressed the issue and then move on. I have also no doubt that he's going to get tremendous pushback from the forces of Neanderthalism on the right, who, in some cases they represent the oil and gas and other industries that don't want change because change means they lose their dominance in the economy. I'll give Mid-American Energy credit for moving away from fossil fuels to some extent into wind. Maybe they're a corporation that are more well positioned to make the adjustment away from fossil fuels. But that industry is very, very powerful. And most players in that industry have gotten rich off of fossil fuels and they don't want to change. So there are those on the right who are going to criticize President Obama for saying anything at all critical about oil, gas, or coal. But, there's also those, of course, who really genuinely just don't get it. They don't understand that we are in a crisis. They don't understand what is happening. Partly, I believe they really don't want to. Anytime, I even go to events where you would expect to find people who really kind of are ahead of the curve on a lot of issues. The Natural Living Expo, for example. I can tell you there were at least 3 people at the Natural Living Expo who approached the climate change booth and said, "Oh, I don't believe in that. Oh, that's not a problem. That's not an issue I'm concerned about." If you're not concerned about it, you really aren't understanding what's going on. And I'm not trying to be arrogant. There's nothing arrogant about pointing to the facts. And this is a fact-based decision. Either you accept the facts or you don't. You don't either believe you don't believe in climate change or don't believe in it. You either accept the facts or you don't. I mean, it's that simple. And I know that despite it being that simple, there are those who are going to continue to pander to the element of our psyche that does not want to have to embrace this threatening challenge. This is a huge problem. It's beyond a problem. Of course, you probably grew up with the book Chicken Little. The sky is falling. The sky is falling. Well, of course, the sky wasn't. In this case, the sky might be falling. It's hard to know exactly what happens with climate change. We don't know what all the outcomes are, but we do know it's happening, and we know that the prognosis is serious. Even if President Obama gave us the most fantastic recipe for moving forward aggressively, ambitiously, dramatically, we would still be in line for an awful lot of hurt as climate change continues to disrupt our economy, disrupt our society, disrupt our planet. So the key should be to to move away from the problem, what's causing the problem, as quickly as possible. And again, I know part of our challenge is to get people used to the notion that things have to change. I can't remember the great mind that once said, if you really want things to stay the same, they've got to change. But that's so relevant to this. If we want to preserve as much of what we have in terms of a great quality of life in this country and increasingly on this planet for more and more people, we have to change. We have to do things a little differently. Maybe we don't get to drive as often. Maybe we don't have our own SUV, Maybe we do a better job at conserving energy in our homes, in our businesses. We certainly have to learn to eat differently. I mean, the current industrial agricultural model is a tremendous consumer of fossil fuels and a tremendous contributor to climate change. So we're going to have to do things a lot different. Some things we like are going to have to go away. We're going to have to learn to like new things. And I don't see President Obama delivering the aggressive call to action that I think we need at this time. And I just hope that people, while praising the good points that he's probably going to make, he's probably going to say some things that we do want to hear, that we do need to hear, encourage some directions that we can take, that we should take. But I hope people don't just fall back on that and say, hey, well, our leader addressed climate change. Let's go back and work on another issue. No. I think the message here is that, yes, the good in this speech needs to be embraced and needs to be encouraged. We need to thank the president and others who have worked on that. But it's a small step forward. It's a starting point. We need to move forward in a very aggressive manner to tackle the issue in a big way. And I think, that's one reason why I think this climate march is so important. The president gives a 20-minute speech today. Well, next year, 1,000 of us are going to make an 8-month-long statement in a very dramatic fashion, marching across the country 14 miles at a time, actually one step at a time, 14 miles per day, as to why this issue needs to become the top priority in this country. And not only is the statement made by marching important, but the things we do as we move forward. This is like a mobile city, a city that is going to be showcasing the technologies that we need to embrace. We have someone who's going to be providing a mobile wind generating unit to go along with the march. We have people who are going to be talking about doing presentations every day on how climate change is affecting the oceans and how the ocean health and well-being is so important for everything else we do. We'll have people showcasing sustainable agriculture, showcasing energy efficiency, so many different things. We're going to be using bicycles on this march in a way that people aren't familiar with bicycles being used. But the truth is, we could be using bicycles a lot more aggressively in commerce. I know of a city out in Massachusetts that hauls all of its recycling by bicycle. Actually, there was a project in Ames that did that as well. This is not far-fetched. These sort of things can be done. This march can help showcase those opportunities, those possibilities. So hopefully what's going to come out of this speech is a dramatic shift in the public consciousness about the importance of moving so fast and aggressive that we finally get off the dime and do it. I don't think that's going to happen, but again, I think we need to embrace the good that is there. We need to continue to push for more broader commitment. And again, we need to, I don't mean to denigrate the people who, quote, don't believe in climate change, but I got to tell you, just honestly, it's not a matter of an opinion anymore. You either accept the facts presented by 97, 98% of the scientists in the world, or you don't. It's like the earth being round. I mean, you can choose to believe that it's flat if you want, but the facts are kind of stacked against you. Anyway, folks, that's my take on the speech. We'll see what happens. We'll talk more about it on tomorrow's program as well. We're going to shift gears here and welcome, we were going to welcome Mark Peterson to the program. I don't see him quite on the line yet. Maybe Maddie is going to pull that off for us here shortly. But Mark wrote an interesting piece in the Des Moines Register recently. He wrote a piece about the importance of farmers being involved with conservation. It's again, much as with climate change, sometimes the argument is made, it's a choice of between either jobs or the planet. And I get really tired of that because it's not that at all. And again, as I was speaking with a friend earlier, jobs versus the planet. Well, the truth is with the Keystone Pipeline, you're looking at 35 jobs. With wind energy, you're looking at a lot more. And as with agriculture, it's not conservation versus the farmer. There is so much more that can be accomplished with conservation that would help agriculture. And I think we just need to have that argument. So I was excited to see a discussion about this in the paper recently. And we are still working to get Mark on the phone here, but I think we're darn close. Mark, are you with us? Hello, Mark.
Hello.
Mark, thanks for taking the time to join us. Sorry it took us a minute to get you lined up there.
Oh, that's all right.
You're probably not out in the fields today.
No, I'm not out in the field. I'm doing one of my other things. I'm driving a truck, actually, but we're parked, so everything's good.
You are a soybean farmer.
I am a soybean farmer. I'm also a corn farmer. Somehow I got delegated to one crop only the other day.
Well, I saw that in the paper. I thought, that's odd. Why would he only grow soybeans? Anyway,
No,
I thought maybe you knew something the rest of us didn't.
No, believe me, I don't.
All right. Well, I guess now, what are your, again? I know you mentioned crop insurance in your column. I mean, this is a good time to have this conversation because the Farm Bill is being discussed, is moving forward. What are your thoughts on conservation relevant to the Farm Bill?
Well, I would dearly love if we could do all the conservation efforts that we need on a voluntary basis and not involve the government. However, there's such a thing called reality. Also, I guess, is the Farm Bill moving forward?
Well, it sure took an historic vote in the House the other day, tanked the Farm Bill. How often does that happen, where a majority party brings up a bill and has it defeated? I only saw that happen maybe twice in my entire 14 years at the Iowa State House. So, it's going to go through. It has to go somewhere at some point. But
Yes. But anyway, I would love to see conservation be on a voluntary basis. However, the reality of the situation is not pointing fingers at anybody in particular. I do think there is a tendency as you get further removed from the land, not everybody, don't generalize, but it can happen, and it can happen with guys on their very own farms. I do know I'm not a large farmer as far as number of acres. I probably could stand to lose a few pounds, but that's another subject. But
I'm not going to go there if you don't want to.
We won't.
All right.
But anyway, I know it's tough enough for me on my farm to try and keep a track of what's going on out there. I can only imagine how some of these guys do it with the acres that they cover. Now, a lot of farmers are way better managers than I am, so they can do it. But anyway, back to the reality of it, I'd love if we could all do what we need to for conservation on a voluntary basis. But whether it be by accident, intentional, or what, I don't feel that it's going to happen.
Well, I mean, Farm Bureau has been making the argument that voluntary works. It's how it should be. But again, the evidence is not panning out in favor of that argument.
I agree. Unfortunately, it just doesn't totally pan out. At the present time, the way it looked that it was going to happen, there wasn't going to be any direct payments in the new Farm Bill. So therefore, the only real thing left was the crop insurance subsidy, which my understanding, and I don't claim to be a great politician. I haven't.
Neither do I, by the way.
Well, I've heard otherwise. Maybe you don't.
Tell that person I said thank you.
But now Drake Larson thinks with Practical Farmers thinks highly of you.
Okay.
I know. I'm on the board of directors of Practical Farmers of Iowa. But anyway, it would be wonderful if it could be voluntary. I don't think it's going to be. The only real hook left is the crop insurance, which until I believe 96 was tied to the conservation compliance. For whatever reason at that time, it was chosen to decouple that, delink it, whatever. I think if we're going to feed at the government trough, the government has the right to make sure that we are keeping up with our compliance.
Well, that's a really good point, because a lot of times you hear folks say, well, we just don't want the government involved with telling us how to regulate our business, how to control runoff, how to deal with these issues. And again, that's a really good argument. I don't know how you counterpoint that argument, in fact. I mean, yeah, there's a lot of money involved in farming that comes from the taxpayers, comes from the public sector. Should we not have some capacity to expect that those farmers are good stewards of the land? And I believe that most farmers are trying to be good stewards of the land. think
I agree with that. I think that is very true. So for a lot, it isn't. The only struggle is just keeping in touch with the government. And I'm not. Our office does a very good job, and it isn't that tough to do. I'm a very conservative-minded person in government affairs and would like to keep it as small as we can. Mm-hmm. But I do feel through the years, I guess I've evolved to the point I've watched this erosion. It seems like when we get rains anymore, I'm not subscribing necessarily to global warming, but for whatever reason, when we get rain events, they seem to be large and therefore harder to control. So it takes more to do it, whether it be cover crops or terraces or a combination.
Don't be afraid to subscribe to global warming. You'll be in the company of 97, 98% of the scientists.
Okay.
That's good company.
Okay. Well, I don't know. I'm still not sure that we're not just in a cyclical pattern, and maybe that has something to do with rainfall. Maybe it doesn't. I don't know. I'm not going there. I just know what I see. I see bigger rain events. I've just made, since Sunday noon, I've made 2 trips to Minneapolis and back across I-80 and up I-35, and even in the flat country, we're losing a lot of dirt, and we can't afford to do that. Yeah. I'm not worried about our generation. I'm not worried so much about the next generation, but my grandkids and the generations from there on, we've got to make sure that we're leaving this ground in a fashion that they'll be able to use it to sustain themselves.
Well, that's good, and I think the bottom line is, in your belief, farmers can still make a good living and comply with reasonable regulations on runoff.
Absolutely, especially it should be easier right now. It's no big secret. It's pretty good out here on the farm right now. Now, has it always been? No. Have we got some wounds that have to be healed from years past? Absolutely. Mm-hmm. But as far as right now and for the near term, it looks pretty good. So it should make it easier to comply with what's needed to be done. We can afford to invest a few dollars in the future.
Now, Mark, I got to ask you one thing. You say in your column, if we keep our nutrients on the farm, they don't go down the river in the process, polluting the water and increasing the dead zone in the Gulf. So by doing this, we become shrimp huggers.
Yep.
That's a cute line.
I'm a shrimp hugger.
I can get a visual on somebody hugging a tree, but I'm having a hard time getting a visual on you hugging a shrimp.
I'm not a bunny hugger and I'm not a tree hugger, but I can be a shrimp hugger. And I guess I'm trying to make it a little bit fun.
You did.
I'm going to take credit for coining that for whatever it's worth, but I'm trying to help us all visualize on a larger scale that it not only affects our farm, it affects what goes on in the Gulf. And I guess, what happens on our farm needs to stay on our farm.
Right. Well, that's a responsible thing to do. And, Iowans have historically been very neighborly. I mean, the fence rule, the unwritten rule about how you manage your fence. But neighbor doesn't mean just the guy next door to you. It could mean the shrimp farmer 1,000 miles downstream.
Absolutely, that is correct.
And you recognize that, and I think that's commendable and very important for others to understand as well. So, Mark, I got to go. Sometime we need to discuss this climate change thing more.
Well, we could discuss that, and there's another area of conservation, and that's conservation of our youth, as in keeping them on the farms. I'd love to discuss that someday with you, too.
All right, well, let us keep in touch again. Great to have you on the program. Thank you again for writing a very interesting and, I think, thoughtful piece with a good humorous image as well that I'm going to try to keep in my mind without having nightmares about giant shrimp coming at me and hugging me in my sleep,
Well,
Anyway. Mark Peterson, folks, soybean and corn farmer.
And corn farmer.
Mark, thanks again so much for joining us.
Thank you. Say, can I just real quick,
Sure.
I know you're a broadcast on a station up in the Postville area.
Yeah.
I'd like to put a shout out to St. Paul's Lutheran from Julius Peterson, who's going to celebrate his 85th birthday this next Monday. The folks at St. Paul's will know who I'm talking about.
Excellent.
All right.
All right, Mark. Thank you so much. Folks, when we come back, we're going to shift gears and talk about the work of One World Birth, a very prominent midwife in Hungary, was arrested for delivering babies at home. That's against the law in Hungary. She went to prison for 2 years. Now she remains under house arrest. It's hard to imagine that this can happen. But it's not just in Hungary where there are problems facing women who want to have the freedom to deliver babies how they see fit. Here in this country as well. We're going to talk with two very distinguished guests shortly when we come back from a break on the Fallon Forum. I do want to take a second to thank the Iowa chapter of the Sierra Club, also Iowa Physicians for Social Responsibility, and the Great March for Climate Action for sponsoring this program. I want to thank Gateway Market and Cafe, my anchor sponsor, for putting their weight behind this conversation as well. I want to thank some of my other business supporters as well, Tinker Heating and Cooling, Hawk Restaurant in the East Village, the Immigrant Entrepreneur Summit, also Tally's Restaurant, Bar and Catering, where I had a fantastic dinner last night, Diana's Wedding Cakes, and also S&P Piano. Folks, we'll be back in just a minute.
From the RE/MAX Real Estate Concept Studios, this is Webcast One Live.
Drug and alcohol addiction slowly steals a person's identity, tearing away pieces of their life little by little, until one day it seems like the hope of a happy future is gone and there's no chance of getting it back. Here at St. Gregory Retreat Centers, we can assure you that there is hope. Our unique approach to recovery begins with the understanding that the dysfunction and damage caused by addiction can be overcome, not just dealt with. Don't let another day go by. Call St. Gregory today.
Well, good morning. This is the 7th of June in the Lord's year 2010, and this is day 1 of WebcastOneLive.com. We will begin with Max World Live with my special guest, Tom Coates. In just a minute, there's Tom. Wait. Howdy. And we will be live for the very first time on Webcast One Live. Someday we're going to look back on this and say, gosh, remember that old day in history? Wonder where Walter Cronkite was. He must have been around hanging there too. But actually, it's the beginning of Webcast One Live. And thank you for listening. Thanks, Rob Spearman, and everybody who's put together this project together. And we're ready to go live now. So thanks for listening to MaxWorldLive.com.
I can't tell you that it's going real well from time to time, but it is going, man.
I'm Brian Leach, owner and general manager of Service Legends. I brought along a couple of the home comfort heroes.
Hi, I'm Tammy Wells.
I am Nick Wondershad.
I'm administrative manager
I am the senior technician
from Service Legends.
It seems like every good thing, when you feel it to the bone that it's good, there's a lot of hard work put behind it. I don't think that you can fake it and have it turn out good.
You know, if we seem like, okay, that's just weird, it's just a furnace, why would you believe so deeply in a furnace? It's not just that, you know, we want to show the world that you can have good service.
Yeah, I mean, it's got to be, it's your home.
You know, it's built into our daily trainings, it's built into our culture, that we're gonna do whatever it takes to have each client say they love us, period.
That's why we spend all the hours in the training that we do. And if we guarantee it's gonna be a good experience for you, or else it's free, what type of work do you think we're gonna do?
There is a guarantee.
Temperature selection guarantee, fixed right or it's free guarantee, comfort guarantee, best value guarantee. All of these guarantees hold us accountable to ensuring that we exceed your expectations. And if for whatever reason we'd fail and we can't make it right, we guarantee all of those guarantees with a 100% money back guarantee.
I mean, if you don't think that your technician can fix it right, are you gonna say that to a client? No.
You don't have to worry about having a technician come to your house.
We drug test, background check all of our team members. We put safe people in your home. Each and every one of our service techs, 400 hours a year in training.
You tell it the minute they walk in the door. They know what they're doing, they've done their homework, and they actually truly care about what you want.
Because at the end of the day, you're the person that makes sure I have a job.
They're gonna be listening. They're gonna wanna know what your challenges are. Then they're gonna come and give you options, and you get to choose.
If I'm there to help and I make it easy and painless, I did my job right that day.
Well, when it comes to your comfort, safety, and your family, you don't necessarily go buy the most expensive, but you get the most bang for your buck.
Oh, it's worth it, because there's a lot of people that will find a way to get it to work right now and then leave and then come back, charge you again, and the cycle just repeats itself. So when I'm out there looking at the furnace, I want to find why it failed today. How can we change the part today with something that you're not going to have to worry about? Is it worth changing the part today? I mean, you can put a lot of money into a furnace. I can fix parts all day. There's good job security in that for me, but is it the right thing for you?
I get a lot of the phone calls of after the technicians are there. They're just in awe. They're like, wow, you guys are great. I mean, I don't even know what to say. You guys are great. Everything you did was perfect. It was great.
Keep going though, I like this.
Just give us a try. I'm gonna take all the risk.
I've got the time to make this right. I've got the support to make it right.
Just check us out.
And if you don't see the value in what we do,
I mean, fixed right or it's free or 100% money back.
enough said.
From the RE/MAX Real Estate Concept Studios, this is Webcast One Live.
I'm not the guy who cared about love. I'm not the guy who cared about fortunes and such.
Max Wellman, not the guy who cared about love or fortunes. Max is great stuff, folks. I hope you enjoy his music as much as I do. And welcome back to the Fallon Forum. We're broadcasting live from downtown Des Moines in the Skywalk. If you're listening to KHOI 89.1 FM in Ames, then you're probably listening at 5 p.m. It's on at Wednesday. It's a rebroadcast of Tuesday's show. Also on KPVL up in Northeast Iowa. That show is rebroadcast at 7 p.m. Back to KHOI for a second. Do not forget the big event that KHOI has going on this Friday, the 28th in Ames. Check that out, folks. Information about that on KHOI's website. Okay, we're going to, we have a new feature on the show called A New Beat on Learning. And oftentimes we're going to be focusing on school and alternatives to school and interesting innovations that happen within our school system. But sometimes we're going to focus on a different type of learning. And again, learning to try to remedy ignorance and misunderstanding and lack of information where it exists. And there's probably no place where you see that problem more pointedly than if you are on the front lines of delivering newborns into the world. And, I'm learning more about this all the time. I live next to a midwife clinic, so that's a big part of why I have been learning more about this. I've got friends who've been instructing me as well, and learned recently about the work of One World Birth. This is a fascinating organization that have put together a really compelling video called Freedom for Birth, and a lot of it is based on, or some of it to some extent, I should say, is based on an experience that we've been tracking in Hungary with a woman who has been on the front lines of midwifery there, and challenging the law. I mean, the law prevents the delivering of babies at home, and she actually was arrested, spent 2 years in prison, now is under house arrest. I mean, the level of ignorance here is overwhelming, and we have a lot to learn. So I'm delighted to have two very exciting guests on the show with me today. Tony Harmon with One World Birth is on the phone with us all the way from Great Britain. Tony, welcome to the show.
Hello, and thanks for having me. It's lovely to be here.
Yeah, and you're just getting ready for your evening tea, I believe.
It's what time is it now? 7 in the evening. So yes.
All right. Well, great. It's remarkable to think about that. I don't think we've ever had a guest on the show from England. We've had a few foreign guests, but this is the first one from your neck of the woods. So thank you for joining us.
Well, I feel very proud.
Yeah. Okay. So tell us a little bit about the work of One World Birth, and again, maybe a little bit more background on the situation in Hungary. But I really want to get some sense of the relevance of that to what's happening in what we call the developed world, in your country and in our country as well.
Okay, so my name's Tony Harmon. I'm a filmmaker. I had a baby 5 years ago, and and before then I was making documentaries, political documentaries, and I made a feature film. And then I had a baby, and suddenly my eyes were open to birth and what's going on, particularly around the world with regard to birth. And I'd never thought about it before, so it's kind of a real sort of journey for me to I don't know, become a birth warrior, I guess you can call it. So what happened is we started filming interviews with the world's leading experts, so midwives, obstetricians, psychologists, academics, So we filmed in the last 2 years, filmed over 100 different experts from America, Canada, across Europe. And they've just been, I've gone to them and said, what's the problem with birth, or what's your perspective on birth? And we've just listened to their interviews. And so One World Birth is an educational organisation, I guess. What we're doing is releasing short form videos from these 100 experts all around the world. And we're also producing feature length documentaries for worldwide release. The whole idea is to promote just the sort of conversations about birth, to get people talking about it, because quite often it's a taboo subject. People might share their not so good birth story, but they don't talk about the beauty of birth, or what it can be and what it means. So the film was just made, called Freedom for Birth. It's about human rights in childbirth, which is quite a niche subject. So it's about the right to give birth how and where you want. So in 2010 in Europe, there's this famous case, the European Court of Human Rights, the Ternovsky versus Hungary case on the 14th of December, where an ordinary woman called Anna Ternovsky took Hungary to the European Court of Human Rights.
Now, it doesn't sound like she's that ordinary. According to the film, she's delivered 9,000 babies?
No, that's Agnes Garib. So her midwife.
Gotcha.
Agnes,
Okay.
So in Hungary, it's not illegal to give birth at home as such, but it's illegal for a midwife or it's unclear whether it is legal or not for a midwife to attend that birth.
So if not the midwife, who would be attending it? If it's legal to deliver at home,
you'd have an unassisted birth, so you could birth on your own.
That's worse. It's like
sure.
It's not a desirable situation. Yeah. So
it's a really complicated situation. So Agnes Garib is a midwife who trained as an obstetrician. So she's a midwife, 22 years experience at supporting women at giving birth at home, but in a country where it's not clear whether it's legal or not. So she's being criminally prosecuted and imprisoned and currently held under house arrest. So this mother, Anna Ternovsky, who was supported by Agnes in her birth, she wanted to give birth to her second baby at home with Agnes, but couldn't because it's illegal, effectively, to have a home birth midwife supporting you. So that's why she took her country to the European Court of Human Rights and won this landmark case, which gives everyone in Europe the right to give birth how and where they want. Allegedly, that's the theory.
That's stated in law, in international.
That's the law. That's the law within Europe. However, people aren't acting on this law, so that people don't know about it. And that's what the film is about. It's about raising awareness. Yeah. But what's exciting is that this concept of being able to choose the circumstances of your birth, this could work internationally. So, I know in the States it is a completely different legal system to Europe, but there's debate at the moment whether a similar case could be taken to the Supreme Court in America. So someone who wanted to give birth at home, supported by a home birth midwife, in one of those states where it is illegal for midwives to support births. That's the kind of interesting thing. So whether that case could go all the way to the Supreme Court and have the Supreme Court in America rule whether or not women can choose the circumstances of their birth. So it's exciting. It's kind of this... It's kind of a revolution happening, but potentially around the world. Just using law to change the way women, I don't know, have the choice to give birth, how and where they want to.
How did we get to this problem? A long time ago, women pretty much gave birth wherever they wanted to, and maybe under some circumstances that were very adverse too. But when I was a kid, when I was born, I should say, my mother was drugged up. As far as, so I've heard that back in the 50s, women were drugged up pretty bad. The husbands weren't even allowed to come into to be any part of the experience at all. And, it was about as unnatural as you can get. We've moved a long ways from that. But how do we even get to the point where it was deemed appropriate to create this horribly unnatural, medicated environment in order to assure the delivery of a baby? How do we ever get there?
It's a complex. The history is quite complex, but effectively, you've got a medical system and doctors do an amazing job. They're fantastic. They have life-saving skills, and emergency cesareans are phenomenal, fantastic. Millions of babies are alive today because of the skills of surgeons. Yet at the same time, we've moved from viewing birth as potentially safe, at least in Europe, where we've got a strong tradition of midwifery, to where it's become a medical event. And in the 50s, there was this thing called twilight sleep, where women were put to sleep effectively to give birth.
Right.
And the whole concept of human rights in birth, that women have choices, wasn't even considered, So, and that's the journey where you've got kind of a medical community and there's a rise in cesareans and birth interventions like epidurals and inductions. So it's very much a kind of a medical event. At the same time, you've got a rise of a natural birth community. So you've got a rise of women who want to have home births or who want to give birth naturally without any kind of medical intervention.
So we're going in both directions.
And that's where we are at the same time. And it's kind of causing this conflict almost where you've got kind of the midwife and natural birth community sometimes at odds with the medical community. They're kind of not understanding each other in a way. They're not seeing their perspectives. This natural birth community might view birth more in a spiritual way, whereas the medical community see birth as a medical event that needs interactions to make it happen. So it's kind of two different clashes of cultures, two kind of ways of thinking about birth that aren't meeting in the middle.
Yeah, and why it's interesting to me to see. I see that happening in a number of spheres in our world. I see it happening with energy. I see it happening with agriculture. You've got the growth of GMO products, and then you've got a strong movement toward organics and direct marketing and local foods. And I was not aware that we have that same tension here in birth. But I do know. I heard just over this weekend that over 30% of the births delivered in the two hospitals in Des Moines are done by C-section. Now that can't be right. Surely not 1 out of every 3 women need to have a C-section in order to safely and healthily deliver a baby.
I think that's right. That's around the world. Cesarean rates are going up around the world. Sort of 20, 30, 40 in Brazil, in private hospitals in Brazil, the cesarean rate is 95%.
95%.
95 in private hospitals in Brazil, because that's their way of giving birth. And that culture of the fact that women can't give birth, well, that's the kind of culture, there's the fear associated with birth. That's kind of coming to America, and it's coming to Europe too. Just that sense of birth being a medical event, cesareans need to be used to deliver babies. And actually, women aren't given the knowledge and the sense that, yes, they can do it themselves, and it can be empowering, it can be spiritual, and it is safe. If you have a trained home birth midwife, there's studies which show that it's just as safe as giving birth at home, particularly if you've got the backups of community. So I'm not particularly an advocate for home births, to be honest. I just want women to be able to choose whether they want to have a birth at home or in hospital or in a birth centre. But at the moment, those choices are limited. That women aren't being given choices. They're not being given the risks and benefits of different procedures like inductions, the risks and benefits, and the risk factors, or episiotomies, or epidurals, or C-sections.
Tony, it's really good information you're sharing. I'm learning, and I'm sure some of our audience is as well. I really appreciate you taking the time to visit. And I would encourage people to go to your website, One World Birth, and view the trailer to Freedom for Birth. And I believe it's about 15 minutes long. Is that correct?
What it is, we did, so the whole film is 60 minutes long.
Right.
But we did a 15-minute cut down because people were saying, look, this information has got to get out into the wider community. So we kind of did a free 15-minute version of the film.
I guess trailer is not the right word for it, but it's a mini version, and it's well worth watching. So.
Oh, thank you very much.
Yeah. Hey, we're going to switch gears, and well, actually, we're not going to switch gears much. We're going to switch coastlines. We're going to go to Oregon and welcome Harmeen Hayes-Klein to the program. Tony, I want to really thank you a lot, and again, good luck with your work.
Thank you very much. Thank you, and then thank you for having me on the show. I've loved it. It's been great.
Great. Well, good to see somebody from England. It's been a while.
Thank you.
All right. And folks, it's going to take us a minute to make the transition. We can only handle one Skype guest at a time. So again, thank you, Tony, so much for joining us. Harmeen Hayes-Klein is an attorney in Oregon. She's with a group called Human Rights in Childbirth. And we're going to talk with her. I'm curious about some of the legal angles on this because, again, as Tony told us, in Europe, there's a law that really sounds like it would protect Agnes, the woman who was delivering babies at home, in opposition to Hungary's law. You know, it just seems like a no-brainer that that law would have the effect of getting her out of, well, she's out of prison, but she's under house arrest. I mean, I don't know what your house is like, but no matter how beautiful your house is, do you want to be locked up in it for years and years? I mean, she's awaiting a presidential pardon. And I'm kind of wondering whether that's ever going to happen. If the president in this country is really committed to this law that makes it illegal to deliver babies at home, or at least illegal to have a midwife present, anyway, we don't have a lot of influence over what happens in Hungary here, but we have a lot of influence over what happens in the U.S. And clearly, there are issues that we need to address here as well. And I'm delighted to have Harmeen Hayes-Klein joining us. Maddie, are we good with our Skype connection? Harmeen, welcome to the program.
Hi. Hi. It's Hermine, actually.
Hermine, sorry.
No problem.
I'll get it right.
Thanks for welcoming me to your show.
Yeah. And are you joining us from, is it Portland or?
Yeah, I'm in Portland, and I lived in Holland for 5 years, the last 5 years, and with a team there organized the first Human Rights in Childbirth conference in May of 2012, about a year.
Well, thank you for taking the time to join us. And you're with Human Rights in Childbirth. What exactly is that organization about?
Well, it's an organization. It's a consumer activist organization that's trying to both connect people for the task of and sort of track developments around the world in women's efforts to claim their rights in childbirth. And having listened to your conversation with Tony right now, I think it's worth clarifying what are the rights at stake in childbirth. I mean, there are numerous. Most immediate and urgent for women is simply a right to support and health care as needed in childbirth when they need medical intervention, for example, when they need C-sections. But also at stake is the right to make the decisions in childbirth. And so that includes the right to choose for a midwife and the right to choose to give birth outside the hospital. But it also includes the right to make the decisions inside the hospital.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
When you're offered a C-section, when you're offered to be given a chemical that's going to make the labor go faster or start the labor, who gets to decide whether the woman's going to receive those interventions? And that issue is increasingly urgent for women all over the world. And here in the United States, our cesarean section rate has risen sort of astronomically over the last 30 years and continues to rise. It's now at 35%.
What was it a few years back?
In the early 70s, for example, it was about 5%. And then its rise is a really interesting story and interesting process, but it's now at 35%.
How do we explain that? What can possibly justify that kind of an increase?
Well, there are many factors to the increase in cesarean sections. A big one, for example, is the use of the electronic fetal monitor technology in hospitals that was introduced in the late 60s. Mm-hmm. That's that machine that women lie on their backs and it straps to their stomach, and a screen shows the baby's heart rate. And when this technology was introduced, the idea was, well, if we can see the baby's heart rate on the screen the whole time, we'll always know when a baby's in trouble and be able to intervene and prevent cerebral palsy and all kinds of injuries that can happen if a baby is deprived of oxygen in utero. And that machine was implemented in all these hospitals before it was really tested in unbiased studies to see whether it worked. And when it finally started getting tested on whether this was a useful machine to use on healthy women having healthy, pregnancies and labors, they discovered that it didn't actually save babies at all. It didn't result in any increase in sort of good outcomes from birth. But what it did was enormously increase the cesarean section rate for a really sort of complicated set of sort of medical legal reasons, where the doctors felt like, if there's a blip on the screen and I don't do a cesarean section, I'll be in trouble. And so it was like the doctors were getting caught in this web as well, and birthing women certainly, and babies were caught in it.
Concerned about a malpractice suit or something.
Right.
Yeah.
And I think that story connects to a comment that I heard you make with Tony just now is that a lot has changed since the 50s, and how does where we're at now relate to our history? But actually, in a sense, not a lot has changed since the 50s, or the 40s for that matter. The technologies that we use in birth change. First in the 40s, it was general anesthesia, and women would be put to sleep altogether, and they would be out cold, and their baby would be pulled out of them with forceps, sleep, slapped.
That's
all
horrible.
All of our iconic images of birth.
I think that's probably how I came into the world.
Yes. Well, the boomer generation came in that way, to unconscious mothers, and the slapping was because the babies were drugged. A normal newborn doesn't need to get slapped when it's born, and same with those. All of the plastic boxes in the nursery. All that sort of came out of this past, and I think it connects even to the climate change story that you were talking to. It sort of, how did we get here is pretty similar to how we got to our climate change crisis, in the sense that we invented all of these technologies, say in the first half of the 20th century. And we saw how useful they were for all these things. And so we started using all these great technologies. And we thought that technology could solve all these problems. And we were really enamored with our technologies in childbirth, for example, whatever they were at the time. And we had no understanding, either with sort of environmental pollution or with birth, for that matter, about the damage that these technologies might be causing in their overuse. But now we know.
Go ahead.
No, in both cases.
Yeah, so in some ways, things have actually gotten worse. Again, if you look at the percentage of births that are delivered via C-section, up from 5% to 35%. Here in Des Moines, it's I think 31 and 33% at the two main hospitals, respectively. That's appalling. And again, maybe mothers aren't knocked out with anesthesia and babies pulled out with forceps and slapped, but a lot of the invasive. The invasive mentality is still there, and it's manifesting itself in different ways. Yet at the same time, you have a very, very strong movement toward home deliveries, midwives, doulas. That whole movement is on the rise as well. There's a tension, and I think Tony pointed this out as well. There's a challenge right now for how to. Maybe for and I don't know, I don't know how deep the economic interest is in maintaining this system that that basically compels mothers to embrace an unnatural approach to birth. I don't know how much money is involved in that, and how much vested interest the medical profession has in maintaining that. And maybe that's part of the tension, too, between the two different worlds.
Well, again, like climate change, Ed, it's like by the time we figured out the damage being caused by these economic systems and these technologies were so entrenched, and the economic system that they support is so entrenched that it's overwhelming to think about changing that system. So it really has a lot of analogies in that way as well. But yeah, this is maternity care is the greatest source of income for hospitals in America. So they're highly invested in making sure that all women come to the hospital and are channeled through sort of institutional systems of care. But it makes sense that you have these two sort of movements that you described, because as you would expect that as the cesarean rate goes, 20, 30 higher, 95%.
95% in Brazil. That's incredible.
Well, in China, there are places all throughout the developing world where the importation of American-style obstetrics on sort of developing world populations and sort of a cultural sense of what is luxury care, for example, is giving rise to systems of care where women are just put through an assembly line for cesarean sections, and babies are born that way, and women are sent home with cesarean scars. With that.
Well, I mean, this is why your work is so important. I really appreciate what you're doing. And again, a lot of this is people making choices in their own lives. Again, it means getting the right information. It means making the right connections and knowing what your options are. But what I only have about a minute left, Hermine. But what do we? You're an attorney, so you work with the law. What if you could just summarize what one or two legal law changes might be helpful to make natural birth easier to access?
Well, what is needed for women in all systems of care, no matter what each woman personally seeks for her care, is a recognition that the right of informed consent applies to pregnant women, and the right to refuse treatment applies to pregnant women, so that when women are in the hospital, for example, and they're talking with a doctor about what to do next, whether they're pregnant or actually in labor, it's clear to everybody in that situation that the person who's going to make the final call is the woman on the basis of information, not the doctor. It's not the doctor's job to say, we're going to do this to you, now sign this piece of paper. That's not informed consent. And that's the way that it's working in a lot of places right now.
And that's exactly what happened with me and my wife when we had my daughter, who actually lives in Portland, Oregon, by the way. We were very insistent with the doctor. We did not want an episiotomy, and they said, we won't do that unless we absolutely have to. And that doctor rushed so fast for that implement. I mean, it was like there was no time, and he was making the decision. He didn't care what we all thought.
Yeah,
he had it on his mind. And I realized he was a student. We were low income, didn't have insurance. He was a student, and I was inclined to believe that that was a practice that he needed some experience with. So he was going to do an episiotomy whether it was necessary or not, because it made no sense at all in that context. But again, we had no right to stop it.
I've heard stories of student doctors cutting the episiotomy after the baby comes out because they need to show their preceptor that they could cut it in episiotomy. And there's no baby stretching the perineum there.
Yeah. Ouch.
Yeah. That was a violation of your wife's right of informed consent.
Yep.
Because she had the right to make that call.
Yeah. And I was trying to do my part and be a strong advocate against it, and even still, I mean, Anyway, that's it's good to know we're making some progress. It's troubling to know we're going backwards on some fronts as well. Hermine, I really want to thank you for joining us.
Thank you for the opportunity, Ed.
Hermine Hayes Klein with the Human Rights and Childbirth Organization, joining us from the West Coast. Thanks again so much.
My pleasure.
All right.
Thank you.
Folks, this has been the Fallon Forum today. And every Tuesday at 12:30, we do a segment called A New Beat on Learning. Been a very educational beat this time for me. We'll be back Wednesday with other programming for you here on the Fallon Forum on 98.3. There you go. It's been over a year, Maddie, on Webcast One Live and on the FallonForum.com. I do want to thank our sponsors again, the Sierra Club, Iowa Physicians for Social Responsibility, and the Great March for Climate Action, and also all of our business supporters, the Fighting Burrito, located in Ames and in Des Moines as well. Also, Story County Veterinary Clinic on Highway 30 between Ames and Nevada. And Ritual Cafe, one of my favorite local cafes here in Des Moines. Also, Sergeant's Garage at 6th and College in Des Moines. Dan Kelly's real estate business in Newton. And the $1 Million Marathon, folks, which is happening right now, going across the country from the West Coast to the East Coast, 160 marathons back to back. I want to thank also the Des Moines Metro Opera. Right now, 3 different operas being performed in Indianola. Check out more information about that at Des Moines Metro Opera online. And again, fantastic production, great company, worth seeing at least one, if not all 3 of their performances. I'll be back tomorrow, folks. I want to thank Maddie Arrington, my producer, and Webcast One Live for providing this studio.
From the RE/MAX Real Estate Concept Studios, this is Webcast One Live.